Hey guys, welcome to Music Theory for February. Thanks for hanging out with me thus far. This month is a continuation of last month's Music Theory post, which was on Antonio Vivaldi's Winter from the Four Seasons. So last month we covered the first movement, which is really well known and you might have recognized. This month, I wanted to take a look at movements 2 and 3, which are also beautiful, although they're not maybe as immediately recognizable, but they do sort of help form this complete concerto with all three movements. So, these two movements that we're going to talk about today also have sonnet verses associated with them about winter. So we're going to look at how those relate to the musical content. But as you can probably guess from the fact that this is a music theory lesson, we're going to really look at the chords and the harmony involved here and some of the techniques that Vivaldi uses. Some of which go back to what we talked about in the first movement. All right, so first things first, just like last time, I want you to go into the description and take a listen to the Voices of Music performance of Winter. For this lesson, you really don't need to listen to the first movement, although you can. So skip ahead to about 325. That's when they start the latter two movements. Okay, so you've listened to the piece. That performance was actually in a slightly lower tuning than concert pitch. So the examples I'll be playing in this lesson will be at concert pitch, so a little bit higher than what you heard in the Voices of Music performance. Anyway, let's dive right into the second movement. All right, so the sonnet here is a little bit more peaceful than the sort of angry winter storm description of the first movement. The sonnet here says, "Let us pass our days at home in peace contented while it rains outdoors." So that's kind of a peaceful sentiment, sort of a relaxing sentiment. So we have a more gentle, relaxing key instead of the F minor, which is a little more harsh and doleful. We have this pleasant E flat major for this section. Now, take a listen to this beautiful, balanced opening phrase, and you'll see what I mean by balanced. Okay. Now, some of you might, using your ear, you might have been able to pick up what the chords there are. The important thing is that Vivaldi starts off with a very simple harmonic structure. So it's the one chord E flat, da 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 da, 5 chord B flat, da 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 da. The violin solo runs up to the A flat there. And that A flat over the B flat chord makes it a dominant 7th chord. So that gives you impetus back to the 1 chord. Then finishes off with a lovely suspension. So that's a little sandwich. E flat, B flat, B flat, E flat. Perfectly balanced phrase, symmetry, right? And closes back on the tonic. Now, Vivaldi is going to take us on a little adventure. So like I said here, we're going on a little adventure, something a little bit less expected, but not too crazy. Listen to the bass line. Descending, right? Still descending. And then there's an accidental, and it's going to resolve back to B flat. So that bass line is D, then C, then B flat, moving in steps, then A flat. These are all notes in the key of E flat major. Now we have the accidental A natural. What do you know about that note A natural within the context of E flat major? Well, it's the raised fourth. So the fourth in the key would be A flat, in the key of E flat. The fourth tone would be A flat. So A natural is a raised fourth. What does the raised fourth do? Well, 99% of the time it's going to lead into the fifth. So a raised fourth is Fi as opposed to Fa, and it's going to lead into Sol. So it does behave that way here. So in movement 1, we saw a number of cases where Vivaldi used a leading tone in a deceptive way and then resolved it differently than was expected. But here it goes as it should, and it sort of, I think, confirms this peaceful, relaxed sense of things are going as they should. You know, I'm sitting inside, I'm sipping on my mug of tea or whatever, watching the rain or the snow falling outside, and things are as they should be. So, and it resolves. Ah, yes. All right. But one cool thing I wanted to point out in that little run is that as Vivaldi moves the bass notes down by step, the chords do not move exactly parallel with the bass. If they did, you would have a very parallel progression, wouldn't you? If you had, if you had the same type of chord moving down with that bass line. Instead, there are inner voices that move where the bass notes do not move in order to create a more intertwined texture. So take a listen to that. Especially right here. Hear that? Now this one. That voice holds over and then resolves. Right? So if you have triads moving down in steps, for instance, if you voice them exactly the same way with no movement, they're going to be parallel. And in particular, they're going to have parallel fifths. Okay? And that's a little bit less interesting than something like this. Where the bass moves down and the other voice moves at different times in sort of a delayed pattern so that it creates some sixths, some fifths, some sixths, some fifths, instead of just fifth, 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 fifth. So you can hear how that generates a little bit more interest. That's why they always talk about avoid parallel fifths so much in theory class. It's not that it's actually a rule. It just is it's a stylistic choice that composers of this period often made because they liked the way that it sounded. So let's continue on. A tiny bit of dissonance there, but not anything horrific, but hopefully, especially if you watched my movement 1 lesson, you'll figure out what I'm about to say. I'm about to talk about where is this pulling us, right? Because you can feel that pull. That wants to go up, doesn't it? Da-da. That's probably a leading tone. Let's look at the score. Ah, yes, it is an A natural, again, this is that Phi coming up, the raised fourth. It's going to lead into B flat. And then opposite the A natural in the bass, we have this E flat. Right? So the A and the E flat form a tritone, and the E flat is going to have a tendency to resolve down to D, whereas the A will resolve up to B flat. So these are the two great resolutions that I go on and on and on about in all of my videos. 4 to 3 and 7 to 8. So Fa to Mi and Ti to Do. Now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, you just said it was Fi to Sol. It is Fi to Sol in the context of E flat major, which is the original key. But if we talk about these two resolutions in the context of the chord that we're going to, which is B flat, then A natural to B flat becomes Ti to Do, and the E flat to D becomes Fa to Mi. So what I'm saying is that Fi Sol is the same type of resolution as Ti Do, and Do Ti is the same type of resolution as Fa to Mi. All right, so here we go. Leading tone, and it does resolve the way that we want it to. Again, this is a comforting movement. This is not supposed to be a wild or angry or threatening movement. This is a comforting movement, as middle movements so often are. Oftentimes, the greater angst and emotion is in the outer two movements of concertos and sonatas, and the middle one is often in a relative major key, a more peaceful key, and it usually has a more contented sound. So anyway, it does resolve the way that we want it to. Let's see what happens next. All right. So that was a lovely little cadence. Relatively expected. We had a suspended fourth, and then we had the leading tone, and then it resolved. Now, what key did we just resolve to, though? Well, we've introduced that A natural, so you would expect to be resolving to the key of B flat, and that is exactly what happens. So no surprises here. Vivaldi has modulated to the key of 5. That's probably the most common modulation that you'll find in Baroque or classical music. All right. Now, how many measures has he used up thus far? Not too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in the 8th bar, we're in the key of 5. Now, remember that melody from the beginning. Right? Now listen to the melody here. Once we're in the key of 5, let's see what happens. Same melody, right? But now transposed into the new key. Exact same melody. Here's something cool that happens, though. Vivaldi started in E flat. He's now in B flat. He's going to need to get back to E flat eventually to close out the movement, right? And this is a short movement. It's only about 16 measures. So if we continue this melodic and harmonic phrase exactly the same way it was originally, well, then it would be modulating up a fifth itself, because the first one modulated from E flat to B flat. So if we keep going in the exact same way, we're going to end up in F, right? So we don't want to end up in F. We want to get back to E flat. But how are we going to do it? So what Vivaldi does, he takes this little melody that very strongly tonicizes B flat. So it goes Fa, Mi, Re, Do, Ti, Fa. Anytime you have Ti and Fa, the leading tone and the fourth, that's going to tonicize that key, right? But then, instead of going on to the sequence that would fall at that place if we copied the melody from before, he repeats that melody that we just played up a fourth. Listen. Okay, so it's the same melody we just played. Listen to the two played together. Here's the second one. Right? So he uses imitation with a transposition up a fourth to gently guide us back to the key of E flat. But it almost feels like nothing's happened, right? It's all just so perfectly balanced. So anyway, feels logical. And now we do have a very similar sequence to what we had before. In the first half of the movement, we had this lovely scalar passages where each scale moves down by one step successively. So we had... That's the part that where we were talking about the parallel chords and avoiding the parallel motion. Okay, so now in the second half, he's going to do a very similar passage, except this time the scales not only ascend, but also their starting points successfully ascend. So listen to that. Okay, now we're in the home stretch. But I want to point out one thing again. While this scalar passage is happening, listen to the accompaniment. So the accompaniment is also going up, right? Stepwise, opposite of what it did before. Before it was going down, now it's going up, and then it resolves. But again, the chords do not just move parallel on the downbeats with the bass notes. Instead, there's a voice that moves on the other beat to create sixths, and then fifths, and then sixths, and then fifths. This intertwining voice leading. So listen to what it would sound like if Vivaldi did not pay any attention to the voice leading in here and just wrote parallel chords. Here's what it would be. Right? It's not bad. In fact, even with the melody, it sounds pretty good. It's not bad at all, but it doesn't have quite the pull that it does in the Vivaldi version. Because this is pop music, right? The fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, from whatchamacallit, Hallelujah. Just moving straight up, 4, 5, 6. That's pop music. Here's Baroque music. Listen. There's the sixth. New chord. Now the sixth. Now the new chord. Now a sixth again. So there's more complexity because instead of going fifth, 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 you're going fifth, sixth, fifth, sixth, fifth, sixth. It's like those, what are those things that go like that? Inchworms? It's like an inchworm effect. But it creates this beautiful pull. Watch. Da, 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 da. What does that remind me of? Oh, that's from Sound of Music. There's so many parallels. Everything connects to Sound of Music somehow, doesn't it? Listen to this little melody. Right? Da 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 da. That's at the end of the Hills Are Alive, right? Same exact melody here in Vivaldi. It's amazing what connections you can find over the centuries. So anyway, here it's, and it doesn't resolve right away. And from here on out, it's a very simple, it's sort of a relaxing, long sigh, I would say. It's the dominant, which is B flat, is holding out in the bass, and the chords are gently pulsating from the B flat chord to the E flat chord above that pedal tone. So here's what it sounds like. Hear that pedal tone? The bass doesn't move, the chords above it do though. This is all what we call a dominant function. So even though the top part moves, it still basically has the function of the B flat chord. The E flat is like a passing chord. So that kind of continues for a couple of measures. Da 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 ya da 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 da, and then finally we resolve da da da. One final cadence da 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 da, and you get this lovely trill as the chords relax. So all in all, a very restful, relaxing movement that doesn't do anything too crazy or unexpected, kind of calms you, right? But it also has a sense of suspense, in my opinion. It kind of feels like that's probably not all that this winter storm had to say. There's probably going to be a final revenge. Alright, so now we are on the third movement. This one goes back to the original F minor. So it's paired with a part of the sonnet now says, to walk the icy path slowly and cautiously for fear of tripping and falling. So I think now there's going to be a sort of a cautious, sense of some tension, right? There's some suspense. The suspense is building. We feel like there's going to be some sort of crash or big event that happens, but it's going to arrive slowly. So we start off, again, like I said, in F minor with, and the meter is 3/8, so it's kind of like a jig feel. Starts off not too fast, and there's just one note in the accompaniment. F. That's it. And the soloist goes to town with these little repeated figures. Most of them are repeated 4 times. Oh, sorry. Now it starts to develop a little bit. Right? Little echoing figures, right? Kind of pulsing, sort of. You can almost imagine 2 voices playing back and forth off of each other, right? Echoing. So that's just sort of playing around, confirming the key of F minor and showing off the violinist's musicality at the same time. All right, so now we're at measure 102. This is one of the coolest parts. So a couple things happen right here. That one note that was holding out forever, the F, now stops and changes and becomes a C, which is now the dominant of the chord rather than the tonic. So we spent the first however many measures confirming the key of F minor with that F. Now we're going to explore this dominant territory, right? And Vivaldi is really going to stretch this territory in a super cool way. You know, because for us novices, we would think, okay, C, all right, we're going to play a C chord, and that's pretty much it, and we're gonna goof around in C. But that's not what happens here. There's a lot of stuff that goes over and inside and around this C, this dominant C. So, first thing to look at is these initial scales. Now, listen real carefully and see if you recognize this. Hear those raised tones right there at the bottom? You're expecting it to go, well, I don't know what you're expecting, but if it was in the key signature, it would sound like this. Right? And you're probably thinking, that sounds very harsh and weird. Kevin, are you sure you have the right key signature? Yes. The reason why it sounds harsh is because I'm playing the dominant chord in my left hand. So that's a C. And in the key signature, it's still F minor. So we still have that D flat in the key signature. So that's going to sound rather harsh against the C. Okay? Now, again, that is not what Vivaldi did. He actually raised those two tones, the E flat and the D flat, to become E natural and D natural. And that fits the dominant chord of C major a little better, right? Which has the E natural. So, now why did he use the D natural instead of the D flat? Because he doesn't want to have this augmented second. If you had the E natural against the D flat, right? There's nothing wrong with that scale. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But I think that Vivaldi wants a little bit more of a lush sound. And the next cool thing about this is that this scale has an invertible quality. It harmonizes with itself when you invert it. So basically what happens is the first violins start playing the scale. And then the second violins start playing the exact same scale in canon, like offset by one measure. So listen. Now listen to that harmony. Tension, more tension, that's your tritone. Resolution, but still wanting to lead out. Octave, leading tone. Tension, and then collapsing back in. So it has this wonderful push and pull sensation to it that it would not have if it didn't have those raised tones. Listen to what happens if I don't have the raised tones. This is weird. Hold on. Do you agree with me that sounds like an exercise? There's no push, there's no pull. It's just, okay, some scales are happening, that's nice, but I'm not particularly moved. But now listen with the E natural and the D natural. Right? So by the way, if you're wondering what that scale is, it is the F melodic minor scale, but we're centering it around C right now. So the F melodic minor scale is F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D natural, E natural. So they're raised 6th and 7th. So when you put that over C, it sort of sounds like a major scale starting from C. So C, D, E, F, G, then with its own lowered 6th and 7th, A flat and B flat. So be on the lookout for that kind of sound in your listening. It's very common in classical music. That's the melodic minor scale, okay? So that's a little bit of invertible canon there for you. All right, so now we're continuing on The C in the bass is still holding out. It really holds out for a pretty freaking incredible amount of time, in my opinion. When I first heard this, I was really astonished what Vivaldi, the interest that he was able to create with only one bass note, right? So, we just did this invertible melodic minor thing. Okay, now we have... Let's talk about that. All right, we need to have a conversation about that. So, first few bars there I played are not anything to write home about. Just some little cascading figures oscillating between the F minor over C and the the E diminished over C. So, same kind of figure we talked about in the previous movement with the B flat pedal and then the B flat and E flat moving over top. Very common in classical music. So this goes on for a couple of measures. Now, here we go. Hear the pull? We did that one earlier. It's the A in the top and the E flat in the bottom. They're pulling outwards, right? So this is a secondary dominant. We hear the leading tone. Now it's going to resolve. But, ooh, that bass note is still sticking with its guns. So that A and E flat are leading us to B flat minor. Okay, so which B flat, D flat, and F, those are the notes that are in that chord. But listen to how that sounds over C. Right? A lot of dissonance here. This is cool stuff. This is cool stuff. And now it gets even wackier. Listen to this next one. Right? That's not the kind of chord that you sit down at the piano and just think to play. You know, especially not if you're playing for your grandma, right? Or you're trying to put a kid to sleep. That's not what you would think of. But it has purpose and meaning in the context of this piece because of where the top is going over the bottom. So it's a temporary dissonance that is going to resolve in a wonderful way. There it is, right? So that is actually a little move. Those three measures, this is a little move that's straight out of Vivaldi's first movement of this exact same piece. So in that we had... Right? Everyone knows that part. So those chords that lead up to the ritornello motif in the first movement, same exact chords here. Same exact chords. So it's the secondary dominant leading to the 4. Then the 4 chord, but in first inversion. So D flat, F, B flat. Then the augmented 6th chord, which is the chord that most strongly leads us to the 5, because it has a half step above the 5, which is the D flat in this case, and a half step below the 5, which is the B natural. So on both ends, it is leading very strongly into that 5 or dominant. Meanwhile, this whole thing is happening over top of the dominant. So you have the thing that is being led to underneath the thing that is leading. So there's a lot of tension here, but it's a very interesting sound. And a sound that would not be found in the Renaissance. And then it resolves. There's a little bit of chromatic motion in there in the second violins, right? We had... So here's the viola and the second violin there. Let's see. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. kind of a cool little chromatic motion there between those two. Now, believe it or not, I know it sounds crazy, but that C is still holding out underneath all of this stuff. Now we're going to have a couple more flourishes before this dominant chord has come to its full completion. Alright, so now we have arrived back in F minor after that extremely long stay on the dominant of C. Now, by the way, that wasn't a modulation. Because a modulation is, a modulation is where a new tone sounds like the home tone. But throughout that whole part, the C in the bass was generating tension, right? It was not the home tone. So everything that was going on around it was still centered around F minor, although there was kind of this intrusion of C in the bass. So it did not modulate to C minor, rather it was simply an extended dominant in F minor. By the way, through this whole section, the sonnet has also progressed a little bit. So the first part, where it was sort of building in tension, we had to walk the icy path slowly and cautiously for fear of tripping and falling. Now, as things sort of pick up in excitement, we have to move vigorously, then slip and fall to the ground. I think this scale is the slipping and falling to the ground. I could be wrong. I did not compose the sonnet, nor did I compose this piece, but I think that that is the culmination of all of that suspense. Now we have, after we've fallen over, the next part of the sonnet says, then to get up and run hard till the ice cracks and breaks. All right, so that violin solo, climbing, coming back down, and then climbing again, and then relaxing. Okay, but what does the viola do during that time? It's descending. All right, now this is no random descent. Listen to the intervals that are generated between the violin landing on the downbeat and the viola landing on the downbeat. So we start with a unison. Then we have this beautiful sixth. 10th, so it's expanding. 12th, right? These are all consonant intervals, right? So Vivaldi constructed this melody in the violin such that as the viola goes down in steps, every downbeat of the violin creates a consonant interval with that viola and also some motion. So we have octave, 6th, 10th, 12th. What's next? That's a tritone. 6th again, octave, 10th. Now we're moving parallel, 10th, 10th, and octave. Right? So it has this beautiful motion. Let's see if we can get it all together. Now, we just arrived somewhere, right? We actually arrived on a G chord. Now, what business does a G major chord have in the key of F minor? Well, none, really. What it is, it's the dominant of C minor. So, when we arrive on that G chord, that's a clue that Vivaldi is probably trying to tonicize C minor. So this is probably a modulation. We're going to depart from F minor. And then that's going to set up some sort of triumphant return to F minor at the end of the piece. So let's hear how he does it. We start off with this C. It's a dominant chord in the key of F. And at this point, that's what it sounds like, because we've just finished doing... Okay, so we're securely in this key, da 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 da, right? But here's the chord. Now, listen to what happens here. Nothing has changed yet. That's just the second violin, the violins are doing that classic oscillating move that I keep talking about, right? The 1 chord over the 5, and then the 5, right? So that's the most famous back and forth oscillation in classical music. But what happens is now Vivaldi sets up your expectations to hear this back and forth, and instead denies your expectations. So listen to what happens. You're thinking this E natural is going to resolve back to F, but it doesn't. It goes down. Listen. Right? It's that signature Baroque sort of lamenting figure, right? Where you have a leading tone that then goes down to a flat, and it's just uniquely it's a uniquely emotional and sad kind of sound, in my opinion. Like I mentioned in the other video, if you like that kind of thing, check out Purcell, When I Am Laid in Earth. When I am laid in earth. Right? It's got that... It's got those leading tones that then go down to flats, and then the flats resolve to the leading tone, then the flat, and then the leading tone. It's that interplay between an upward pull and a downward pull, right? Really cool. So anyway, same thing here. I would say this has a downward pull, right? Because you want to resolve down. Now this, you have an upward pull, but it's denied. You get another downward pull. This one does resolve down. That one I think has an upward pull, but you're denied again. Now this one, most of our ears would be expecting the following, right? We would be expecting a double resolution, na-na and na-na. What we have is D flat and F over C. Why are you expecting that double resolution? Well, because the context here is C. A C chord is C, E, and G. D flat and F are both a half step above the notes C and E, respectively. So when you hear D flat and F over C, your brain is telling you, please resolve to C and E, right? Instead, what Vivaldi does is he gives you one of them, but kind of throws you off on the other one because he gives you an E flat. A little bit more melancholy, right? We're going through a journey here. Some growth is happening. Something is changing, right? Now, what does that E flat indicate? Well, the E natural, the whole point of that was to tonicize F minor. Whereas now that we have an E flat, maybe C minor is becoming more of a possibility, right? I mean, after all, we have a C in the bass, and now we've got this E flat instead of E natural. So now it's no longer a C major kind of sound. It's not a C dominant sound anymore. Now it's a C minor sound. And the other thing that gives it away is the presence of the D natural in the violin, right? Previously we had D flat. Now it's D natural. That's in the key signature of C minor. Now this sounds like straight up C minor, doesn't it? Now he's going to do all the same tricks in C minor with that leading tone, but it doesn't resolve. It goes down to the flat. And then the flat resolves down to a new leading tone. That resolves down to another flat. Now we're on the flat now is A flat. So Vivaldi, through these subtle shifts with the accidentals, has weaved his way cleverly into C minor, such that now when we land on the G major chord, it feels like the dominant chord, right? Because we've been conditioned or brainwashed into thinking that we're in C minor. I'm just being silly. We are actually in C minor. But anyway, there's been this subtle shift, so now landing on the G dominant chord sounds perfectly normal. Okay, now we have this classic oscillating figure that goes on with that pedal in the bass. Now the pedal is G, right? You're probably noticing this entire movement is all about pedal tones. That's what it is. It's basically a clinic on how to write beautiful string arrangements over a very limited number of bass notes. I think there's 3 bass notes in the whole thing. So anyway, until you get to the last page. Aha! Recognize this? This is the return of that invertible melodic minor scale. But now it's in the context of C minor. Okay? So it's centered around the G now. Instead of previously it was in F minor, so it was centered around the C. And then we have a couple more little angry flourishes. Right? Again, continuing with this this oscillation between G and C minor over G with these angry arpeggios. And let's see what the sonnet is doing at this point. At this point, like I said, we've gotten up, we're running hard, and it says until the ice cracks and breaks. So I'm thinking this building of tension is the ice is cracking, right? You're about to fall. Hopefully you're not falling into a freezing lake, but I'll leave that up to your imagination. So anyway, tension is building. And then we have this final scale. Let's see what this is. That arrival, I don't know what to call that. It kind of has this feeling of like the ultimate suspense. You know, it's like we've been building. Now, what is going to happen, Vivaldi? Please tell us, right? We can't take this anymore. So after this building of tension and this abrupt end on the G dominant chord, we're expecting maybe something bombastic, like a race to the finish, or some sort of, the return of the angry storm or something of that nature. But Vivaldi doesn't give us that just yet. He, throws us one more surprise. And this one comes in the form of this lovely little section called Lento, or titled Lento. Right? This is more gentle. It's kind of like almost like has a pastoral feel, just very relaxed, and it starts to get into the relative major of E flat, so maybe more reminiscent of that second movement that was in E flat. And it's just very gentle, and it oscillates between some very, very sort of simple chords. Really nothing too alarming. Again, maybe I would say lulling us into a sense of complacency. Let's see what happens. So that was all just these very gentle gestures in E flat major, playing around with the 1 chord E flat and then the 5/7 chord B flat 7. A little bit of the 4 chord mixed in there. We have this final little, gentle gesture, and that is going to lead us into the actual race to the finish line. All right, so we are finally at the race to the finish line. The soloist is going to take off with some really impressive runs. And this part it's going to return very quickly to F minor. And it's very reminiscent of the first movement in the sense that it has these chugging chords in the orchestra that are then answered by these dramatic virtuoso runs in the violin. And that just goes back and forth until everybody sort of reunites at the end and chugs out a couple of, great heavy metal chords before resolving to F minor. So, that lento section was in E flat. That was kind of lulling us into a sense of complacency. But now, listen to the sonnet. It says, to hear through the iron gates the desert wind, the north wind, and all the winds at war. And then finally it says, this is indeed winter, but of a sort to bring joy. That's kind of an interesting thought at the end there. And that's how I feel as this piece ends. I don't feel sad, even though it's describing a very harsh reality. It's kind of a sense of wonder, right? So this is indeed winter, but of a sort to bring joy. And I really think that Vivaldi captured that with the minor key and yet just enough hints. There's enough complexity within this minor key that it doesn't feel all sad. It gives you a sense of wonder. So you have everyone playing together. Right? And then this final romp. Right? Very similar ending to the first movement, and it really brings the whole piece, gives it a sense of completion in the sense that it really ties you back to that first movement. It has that same feel with the steady stream of 16th notes, and the cadence is very similar here with the descending down into the lower registers and then setting up this beautiful suspended chord before the final dominant and then F minor. So, Qu'este l'inverno, ma tal che gioia apporte. That's my attempt at pronouncing this Italian. This is indeed winter, but of a sort to bring joy. Alright guys, that's all I have for you this time around. Of course, this piece is just so chock full of great stuff. I'm sure somebody else could have created a 2-hour-long video about other things with this piece and not mentioned a single thing that I talked about. So, if there's something about this piece that you really like, drop it in the comments, or any thoughts or feelings that you had. I hope that you're able to appreciate this piece, and by extension, other kinds of Baroque and classical music a little bit more now that we've gone through some of the techniques and some of the harmony involved here. So, anyway, hope you enjoyed Vivaldi's Winter, and I will see you guys next time.